So, talking about Right Reader today and improving student literacy rates is what we're going to focus on. Student literacy is something that we as K 12 educators are consistently concerned about, and in terms of where students are in their journey of reading. And Right Reader has been a real asset to support us as the Henrico Education Foundation and ensuring that our students are improving their literacy skills. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. This is a little bit about myself as a curriculum developer and someone who has worked in literacy for quite a number of years in terms of helping students improve their overall reading levels. For Right Reader itself, Barbara already gave a great introduction to Right Reader and what it does as a platform. But Right Reader enables K-5 students to become published authors themselves. And so this really kind of helps us to hone in on that idea of students becoming authors in the classroom. So we want students to be able to use text. We want students to be able to write based on their interests. And we want students to also be tapped in appropriately to technology because we know it's a large part of their learning experience now and has a large influence on what our students are interested in and what they're interested in writing about. So that is also a feature that we wanted to focus on. And it also, the platform itself empowers teachers with an easy to use tool for implementing that evidence-based reading and writing instruction that we're so focused on as K-12 leaders and teachers. And it provides instruction with minimal planning and quick kind of pivots for student learning. So you can implement it to multiple different content areas. So science, history, reading, even mathematics, depending on the topic. And so there can be a lot of usage for this, including enrichment subject matter. There's also a structured learning approach with the science of reading that Right Reader takes that we're going to look at. And so there's a creative literacy tool available through Right Reader and through the use of it for students to be able to enhance their learning, to share with each other, to collaborate, to share with classmates. And it again supports that speech synthesis, and students can share their work. So to share some of the goals that Right Reader helped our organization support specifically, student engagement. We particularly wanted all of our students to be engaged in all of the programs that we were partnering with, and to ensure that all of our students had access to the learning. The science of reading is where our literacy focus really is, and where the nation is really shifting in terms of the reading research and how it's changed over the last 15 years, and where we want to focus on in terms of ensuring that all of our alignment for literacy is there in the science of reading. So all of our programs, we aim to make sure they are aligned, which Right Reader is, and we'll talk a little bit more about that momentarily. So literacy is a focus of ours, and then also family and community engagement. So this is a great tool to ensure that your families are engaged in what your students are doing during the school day or in the after school program space, making sure that students have that full engagement, not only at school, but also at home, because they can log in anywhere to the Right Reader platform and work on their text that they are working on and work on their publications. So for student engagement, we know that Right Reader engages students by assisting them with composing their own books, and that it's a digital platform that not only allows them to publish, but allows them to share with their classmates, which is a great tool. And so now we're going to talk a little bit about the impact of student learning and the impact of the pandemic on student writing, particularly. So this first sort of graphic here is from the National Center for Education Statistics. This was a study done directly after the digital learning time that happened after the pandemic occurred, or during the pandemic, sort of on the end of that time. And so essentially there was a study conducted about student learning in general. This is for reading and mathematics. We'll look at writing on the next slide. But essentially the long-term trend, they conducted a special administration reading and mathematics assessment for age 9 students to examine student achievement during the COVID-19 pandemic. And so again, the average scores for age 9 students in 2022 declined by 5 points overall in reading and 7 points overall in mathematics compared to 2020. And this was the largest average score based on the graphs that you can see on the right-hand side. That was actually the largest average score decline in reading overall since 1990 in the nation, and the first ever score decline in mathematics overall. And so this was obviously a really large scale event that took place in terms of the impact on student learning. particularly when we talk about writing. This comes from the National Library of Medicine. There was a study done that looked at the quality of writing, handwriting fluency, and the attitude towards writing of first grade students, tested immediately after emergency remote instruction ended in the spring of 2020. And those scores were lower than the scores of first grade students from the same schools tested the year earlier before the start of the pandemic, which a lot of us have seen the direct impacts of the pandemic on student writing, particularly as students have been engaging were engaging in a solely digital platform for quite a long time. And depending on their level of engagement with the schoolwork that they were doing during the pandemic school year, it really had a large impact and a really profound impact on their learning experience. So talking a little bit about the science of reading and literacy. So the science of reading, as those of us in K-12 education know, is a collection of research that explains how people read and how to best teach reading. And it's a multidisciplinary field that includes education, psychology, neuroscience, and other fields. But essentially, it's made up of the 5 pillars that you see to the right. So phonemic awareness, phonics, vocabulary, fluency, and comprehension. And so the simple view of reading is kind of what sums this up in terms of word recognition, language comprehension, and how that equates to reading comprehension over time as we prioritize not one over the other in terms of word recognition and language comprehension, but when we prioritize what. So in terms of word recognition and automaticity, really focusing on that in terms of that word recognition piece being taught in K through 2 and really heavily emphasized so that students do have that automaticity of reading so that when they get to the time where they need to utilize their comprehension skills, they've gained enough of that automaticity to be able to address those reading needs. And then in terms of Right Reader supporting that model and supporting the science of reading, it's the core of our curriculum programming at the Henrico Education Foundation, but it ensures that students are working on both word recognition by reading other compositions, language, and it focuses on language comprehension, and again has the text to speech capabilities that Babar had outlined. And then in terms of the science of reading supporting writing, it supports the aspects of writing by emphasizing the interconnectedness of reading and writing skills. So the science of reading highlights how reading and writing are not two things to be taught separately, but are really two sides of the same coin, essentially. And should be taught in a systematic way. And so highlighting the importance of explicit instruction in those foundational skills. So the foundational skills that are emphasized in the science of reading structure will help promote meaningful writing experiences. We know that they need to be taught together. There's also a simple view of writing that has been studied and generated in terms of how the following components of text generation, transcription, and executive functions tie into working memory. And so essentially we know that there are research studies, and we do have a large array of research at this time based on what students need in terms of what the foundations of their literacy instruction should be to be able to address more advanced content. And so essentially Right Reader will support us in that journey by not only exposing our students to that language comprehension, but also ensuring that they have the foundations to also simultaneously work on that reading and writing piece together. So again, strengthening their literacy skills overall because they should be taught simultaneously. So for the other goals that that Right Reader supports, equity being one of them for us, talking through the goals that we have as an organization, and equity again being one of our major focal points at the Henrico Education Foundation. Right Reader supports ELL students, supports differing learners in terms of the accommodations that teachers are able to set for students within the platform, and also a focus on preserving Indigenous languages as we talk about equity within schools and within classrooms, and it being the core foundation of many organizations, as it should be. So talking about preserving Indigenous languages, there's a little sort of background about how Right Reader does that, but understanding that they hold rich cultural significance and preserving them is crucial for maintaining traditions and knowledge. And supports this Right Reader supports this effort in ensuring that students are empowered to create books in their own native languages. So ensuring that the language capabilities are able to support students in that journey essentially and making their writing experiences authentic. And so family and community engagement, again, being another really large component of what we do in the after school space as the Henrico Education Foundation, but also family and community engagement is obviously a large part of the K-12 school day piece as well in terms of how families are engaged in what their students are doing in the classroom. So Right Reader allows students and families to be engaged through book fair events, project-based learning presentations, and many other opportunities for gallery walks and other creative ideas for bringing your families into the learning. This is also a great platform to engage students again in that out of school learning space at home, to really get families involved in promoting their students' literacy skills outside of school and working on that outside of school hours.